You felt it, haven't you? That strange electric moment when reality doesn't look the same anymore, when you realize the way you've been seeing the world, trying to fit in, trying to please, trying to survive emotionally, was just the surface, and then something cracks. It's subtle, almost quiet, but it feels seismic inside you. You begin to notice how deeply you've been feeling everything all along, how often you've been pretending not to. An INFJ awakening isn't a loud transformation. It's internal. It's the moment you stop absorbing the noise of the world and start hearing your own frequency. From that point on, life stops being random. It starts feeling like a pattern you were always meant to recognize. Let's dive right in. All right, first thing first, you stop fitting in and finally accept it. You've spent most of your life trying to blend in, adjusting your tone, your energy, even your personality, just to make other people feel at ease. You've studied social cues like an unspoken language, perfected the art of making others comfortable, and told yourself that this was kindness. But deep down, it was survival. You learned early that being too intense, too honest, too different made people uncomfortable. So you became a shapeshifter, adapting to every environment, every crowd, every expectation. But when the INFJ awakens, that illusion collapses. You suddenly feel the weight of how much you've been bending, how often you've silenced yourself for peace. You start to realize that your need to fit in has been draining the very essence of who you are. And it hits you. Fitting in was never the goal. You were never built to blend in. You were built to stand out, quietly. The realization stings at first because it forces you to confront the loneliness you've always felt. Yet, underneath that loneliness lies something stronger: self-acceptance. You start to see that the very thing that made you different was never a flaw. It was your radar, your signature frequency, your way of seeing life from an angle few others can. You notice how people are drawn to your insight, but unsettled by your depth. How they admire your calmness, but avoid your truth. And for the first time, that no longer bothers you. You no longer chase belonging in spaces that shrink your soul. The awakened INFJ doesn't rebel loudly. You withdraw silently from what feels false. You stop playing roles that exhaust you. You stop entertaining conversations that drain you. You start standing in your authenticity, even when it makes others uncomfortable. You accept that being misunderstood is part of your path. You understand that solitude is not rejection, it's alignment. And when that realization settles in, something beautiful happens. You no longer need permission to exist as you are. You stop chasing acceptance and start radiating integrity. You stop asking, why don't they get me? And start saying, it's okay if they don't. Because now you finally understand. Your purpose was never to fit in. It was to awaken others simply by existing as yourself. And next up, your intuition becomes uncomfortably accurate. It starts quietly, like a whisper you've heard all your life but never trusted. You've always had good instincts. You knew when someone was lying, when a friend was in pain, when something was about to go wrong. But now, after awakening, that whisper becomes a flood. Your intuition no longer feels like guessing. It feels like knowing. You walk into a room and instantly sense the emotional temperature. You can tell who's masking sadness behind a smile, who's pretending confidence, who's silently falling apart. You don't just notice what people say, you feel what they mean. It's not mystical or supernatural, it's pattern recognition on a subconscious level. The INFJ mind is wired to read nuance, to process tone, rhythm, body language, energy. Your brain collects micro-expressions and emotional data faster than you can consciously interpret them. What feels like intuition is really deep empathy, mixed with extraordinary perception. You pick up details most people filter out, and your mind translates them into emotional truth. But awakening magnifies it. Suddenly you can't turn it off. You sense tension before an argument starts. You feel heartbreak before anyone speaks. It's both enlightening and exhausting. At first, it feels like a burden. You might question your sanity, wonder if you're overanalyzing, if you're imagining things. But again and again, you're proven right. People confess the very things you sensed long before they said a word, and that confirmation shifts something in you. You begin to trust yourself. You stop needing external validation for your intuition because you've seen the evidence. The cost, however, is high because now every conversation, every silence, every hidden emotion echoes louder than before. You see through facades so clearly that pretending becomes impossible. You can no longer ignore dishonesty, even when it's polite. You sense emotional dissonance like static. It hums beneath every false smile, every manipulative compliment, every word that doesn't match, the energy behind it. Like the awakened INFJ learns to navigate this not by numbing the gift, but by mastering it. You learn that not every truth must be spoken, not every insight must be shared. You become a silent observer, someone who sees everything but chooses carefully when to act. And that's where your power begins. Because intuition without wisdom is chaos, but intuition with awareness is peace. You start using your insight not to expose others, but to guide yourself. You read energy the way others read signs on a map. You no longer wait for proof. You move when it feels right. You begin to trust that quiet voice, the one that's been trying to protect you all along. And that's when you realize your intuition was never the problem. Ignoring it was. Third on the list, you detach from drama instantly. Before awakening, you were the emotional anchor for everyone around you. The friend who listened for hours, the mediator in every conflict, the healer in every storm. You couldn't help it. Your empathy pulled you into other people's chaos, like gravity. You believed that helping meant absorbing, that understanding meant fixing, and that love meant sacrifice. You carried everyone's pain until you forgot what your own energy felt like. But when an INFJ awakens, that dynamic shatters. You suddenly see how often you've mistaken chaos for connection, how often you've confused being needed with being valued. You begin to understand that saving people who refuse to save themselves isn't compassion. It's self-destruction dressed as kindness. And so something inside you changes. You stop chasing drama. You stop engaging in endless emotional loops. You stop being the person everyone comes to when they want to vent, but never change. At first it feels strange. You might feel guilty for saying no, for pulling away, for not answering that late night call that always ends with you drained and them unchanged. But then you realize that detachment isn't cruelty. It's clarity. You no longer absorb every emotion you sense. You no longer rush in to rescue people from the lessons they need to learn. Instead, you hold space. You listen, but you no longer drown. You care, but you no longer carry. You've learned that empathy doesn't mean self-erasure. When someone tries to pull you into chaos now, you can feel it instantly. That emotional bait, that toxic loop, that familiar heaviness. But you don't take the hook. You smile, stay calm, and let silence do the work. People who thrived on your emotional availability will notice the change. Some will call you distant. Others will accuse you of being cold. But you'll know the truth. You've simply stopped participating in their patterns. You've outgrown the cycle. The awakened INFJ no longer measures love by how much pain they can endure. You've learned that real compassion includes boundaries. You can still be warm, still be kind, But now you do it with intention, not obligation. You understand that not every fire deserves your water, and not every cry for help is meant for you. And the beauty of it all is this: when you detach from drama, your peace becomes magnetic. You stop attracting chaos and start attracting people who value calm. You no longer live in emotional survival mode. You live in alignment. You realize that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's sacred. Because only when you protect your own light can you truly help others find theirs. And fourthly, you start seeing through illusions. There comes a moment in your awakening when everything that once seemed certain begins to unravel. It doesn't happen overnight. It's more like fog lifting from a landscape you thought you knew. You start to see through the stories people tell, the systems they obey, the distractions they worship. You begin to question everything you once accepted as truth. And it's not because you've become cynical. It's because you finally stopped numbing yourself to the noise. You notice the subtle manipulations everywhere. The way marketing preys on insecurity, the way social media rewards performance over honesty, the way people pretend happiness for validation. You start seeing how much of the world runs on illusion. Curated images, selective truths, emotional theater. It hits you how many people are living in survival of the ego, chasing approval, power, or comfort, without realizing they've drifted far from who they really are. You start catching it in conversation, in entertainment, in yourself. The realization is both empowering and unsettling. At first, it can feel isolating. The veil lifts, and you realize how few people are actually awake. You begin to see how often conformity replaces authenticity, how the loudest voices are often the emptiest. You might even miss the ignorance you once had, the simplicity of believing what you were told. Because awareness comes with responsibility. You can't unsee manipulation once you've recognized it. You can't pretend that the world is innocent when you've seen how narratives are designed to control attention, emotion, and belief. But here's the deeper truth. Awakening isn't about rejecting the world. It's about perceiving it clearly enough to move through it consciously. You stop getting emotionally entangled with the illusion. You stop letting external chaos dictate your inner peace. You start operating from intuition, not influence. You no longer react, you observe. You no longer believe, you discern. And that discernment becomes your protection. You realize the truth isn't always pretty, but it's always freeing. Seeing through illusions doesn't make you superior. It makes you responsible. You learn to live in awareness without bitterness, to engage with the world without being consumed by it. You can sit in a room full of noise and remain anchored in silence. You can scroll through chaos and stay calm inside your own thoughts. The awakened INFJ becomes a quiet observer of humanity's masks, not to judge them, but to understand them. And you see that everyone wears armor to survive their own pain, and instead of resenting the illusion, you develop compassion for it, because you remember when you wore yours too. And that's when it clicks. Seeing through the illusion isn't about escaping the world. It's about walking through it awake. You stop trying to fix it. Stop trying to wake others up before they're ready. You live as an example. Instead, you let your clarity be contagious, because the most powerful truth doesn't shout. It radiates. Fifthly, you step into purpose quietly. After the dust of awakening settles, a strange calm begins to take over. The noise of confusion fades, the identity crisis softens, and what's left is a steady hum inside you, a pull towards something bigger than yourself. You no longer crave success for validation or recognition. Instead, you crave alignment. You start asking different questions, not what do I want to achieve, but what am I meant to give? That's the moment you realize that your purpose isn't something you chase. It's something that's been waiting for you to become still enough to hear it. When an INFJ awakens, purpose stops being a destination and starts becoming a natural expression. You begin to see how everything in your life, your struggles, your heartbreaks, your mistakes, was shaping you to serve in a specific way. The sensitivity you once saw as weakness becomes your radar for truth. The empathy that exhausted you now becomes your instrument for impact. You finally understand that your pain wasn't punishment. It was preparation. You don't need a grand mission statement or a viral calling. You move with quiet conviction. You write the thing that needs to be written. You start the conversation that others are afraid to have. You help one person see themselves differently, and that's enough. Because purpose, for an awakened INFJ, isn't about scale. It's about depth. It's about knowing that even the smallest act of authenticity can create ripples in someone else's life. There's a maturity that comes with this stage. You no longer need to prove your value to the world. You no longer chase every opportunity out of fear of missing out. Instead, you become selective with your energy, your projects, your people. You start recognizing that your gifts are not meant for everyone, and that's okay. The right people will find you because of the energy you embody, not the noise you make. The irony is that as you step back from trying to be seen, the world begins to notice you more. People start gravitating toward your calm. They feel the grounded confidence that comes from someone who's not trying to impress, but simply to express. They sense that you've stopped playing the game, and that makes you magnetic. Purpose to you now is not about achievement. It's about authenticity. You understand that real success is when your inner world and your outer world finally match. You're not performing anymore. You're living in truth. You start trusting timing, trusting silence, trusting yourself. And the most beautiful part? You realize that you don't need to announce your transformation. Your energy speaks for you. This is what it means to step into purpose quietly. You stop forcing, stop proving, stop searching. You just are. You move through life like a steady current, subtle, but powerful enough to shape everything it touches. Because when an INFJ awakens, their purpose isn't shouted into the world. It's felt by it. Last but not least, the paradox of peace and power. At last, you arrive at the core. When an INFJ fully awakens, something remarkable happens. You stop swinging between extremes, the endless giving and the silent resentment, the deep love and the quiet withdrawal. The emotional turbulence that once defined your inner world begins to settle, but what replaces it isn't emptiness, it's power. Not loud, performative power, but quiet, steady, grounded power, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. You start realizing that real strength has nothing to do with control. It has everything to do with awareness. You no longer try to predict or manipulate outcomes. You simply observe them, respond to them, and trust your intuition to guide you where logic can't. You begin to understand that peace is not the absence of chaos. It's the ability to remain centered in the middle of it. You no longer run from life's noise. You navigate it with calm precision. People around you sense the shift before you even speak. There's a stillness in your energy now, the kind that unsettles the ungrounded and comforts the self-aware. You radiate certainty without arrogance, compassion without attachment. You no longer waste energy proving your worth or defending your sensitivity. You've transcended the need to be understood because you finally understand yourself. This is the paradox of awakening for an INFJ. You become both softer and stronger. Softer because you no longer need armor. Stronger because you finally know you can survive without it. You learn that peace doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. Your actions become intentional, your words deliberate, your presence magnetic. You're no longer pulled into emotional turbulence or external validation. You've found your internal compass, and it never lies. You see now that power doesn't come from dominating others. It comes from mastering yourself. You lead without leading. You influence without effort. You impact people simply by being fully present. The awakened INFJ no longer fights for attention They draw it effortlessly through authenticity. Your energy speaks the language of truth, and people who are ready to grow will hear it instantly. And yet, the beauty of this transformation is its humility. You don't need recognition for your wisdom. You don't need applause for your peace. You know that the real work happens in silence, in the spaces between words, in the stillness between decisions. You've learned that stillness itself is a form of power. It's what allows you to see clearly, to choose wisely, to love deeply without losing yourself. In this final stage, you realize awakening was never about becoming more. It was about becoming less. Less reactive, less afraid, less attached to the stories that once defined you. What remains is essence, raw, unfiltered, grounded awareness. You've shed the layers of performance, fear, and expectation until all that's left is truth. And that truth is freedom. Freedom from the noise, from the roles, from the need to explain who you are. You exist now in a quiet strength that doesn't demand the world's approval. You've learned to live peacefully in your own authenticity. You no longer chase meaning, you embody it. That's the paradox of peace and power. The more you surrender, the stronger you become. The more you let go, the more influence you have. And the more you trust yourself, the less you need the world to agree. Because the awakened INFJ doesn't just survive life, they transcend it.